Hello, hello, hello. So today we're continuing with chapter 3, or episode 3, however you wish to see it, of Carlos the Jackal, the notorious or famous Venezuelan terrorist guy. So we spoke a lot about his psychology, like how he became the way he is, like his super devout Catholic mother and his Marxist father. So, is radicalization and political motives. Now, when you become radicalized, obviously that's different from just being a Marxist. So his dad was a Marxist. His dad's not well known, and he's not well known because, well, he was a successful lawyer, but there's millions of successful lawyers in the world. Like, he was a Marxist, but there's millions of Marxists in the world. So the reason I'm making a video about Carlos the Jackal and not his dad is obviously because his dad didn't do anything super remarkable. He didn't do something super remarkable because, like, well, he was eclipsed by his son, point one. But point two, he operated within the legal framework of Venezuela, and he also, he wasn't radicalized. Like, so he was just a normal garden variety champagne Marxist, whereas his son was radicalized. So when you go radicalization, what is that? Like, that's like being ISIS, that's like being a Nazi, like a apartheid era, like nationalist, like some North Korean party apparatchik. So by the time Carlos became involved in major terrorist operations in the 1970s, his psychological makeup had been deeply shaped by his upbringing. His family's neglect and political radicalism had pushed him into the arms of left-wing terrorist organizations, where he would find the violation and purpose he so desperately sought. However, his radicalization was not simply about ideology. It was a psychological escape, a means to reclaim a sense of control and power that has been missing in his earlier life. So yes, like, He became a radical because of his family's neglect. Like, his father was like busy with many things, as discussed in the previous episode, and also his mom was like super devout. When you're super devout, you firstly like serve God. Your family is of secondary importance. Like, maybe you're an awesome person and you can combine both of these things and everything works out perfectly. That's not, that's quite possible. But usually when you read, just go read any book or watch any movie, like, when you hear the word, just the adjective devout, it means that this person has a very specific, like, view on the world. And, like, there is a very good chance your children may, like, become secondary citizens in the household. Like, there's no, like, when you're devout, there's no room for lots of playing around, fooling around, exploration. You have to stick to exactly what your religion dictates. And there is nothing wrong with like, doing what's religiously expected from you. I'm saying is that you can go too far. Like, no extremity is, like, good for you. Carlos's journey into terrorism also involved the element of opportunism. While his ideological beliefs were genuine, his desire for recognition and power was equally important. His rise within the Palestine movement and his eventual partnership with various radical organizations were as much about advancing his personal goals as they were about advancing a political cause. Terrorism for Carlos was a tool of empowerment. And as he orchestrated bombings, hijackings, and assassinations, he became a symbol of power, an enforcer for his own brand of justice, derived not from philosophical reasoning, but from psychological necessity. So I would also say that essentially, when you are like that, here we see a person that follows a certain psychology. Like the the ideology is almost secondary. Like that guy from another South American revolutionary, I think, much bloodier than Carlos the Jackal, was like Abimael Guzman. He was the leader of Shining Path revolutionary Maoist organization in Peru. And it's very similar. Like he was like basically a champagne Marxist who was actually like very comfortable in his life in general, and it was always like about him. For example, he had like, he cheated on his wife, these kinds of things, because like you're inherently selfish human being, like, or he was like inherently selfish human being. So then, when you cheat, quite often you're a selfish person. I'm not saying you're an evil person if you cheat. I'm just saying there's a possibility you may be selfish. So this is like what one of the driving forces, like is his need for, like attachment, something that's missing in his life. Carlos the Jackal's transformation from a relatively unknown young man into one of the most notorious terrorists in modern history was not an abrupt shift. It was calculated. Gradual process shaped by a combination of personal factors and broader political forces. His radicalization was a product of both his psychological makeup and the international political climate of the 1960s and 70s. So the 1960s and 70s was like, it was pretty like significant in the sense that this was the perfect breeding ground for revolutionary movements, because you had like Africa just like becoming independent. Latin America was going through a lot of like trouble onto its way towards democracy. Like there was a lot of American intervention in South America to always keep their governments in line for, resource extraction. You had like Southeast Asia, like French Indochina, like rebelling against their French masters, and then the American masters, like on their way to independence. There was like the CIA orchestrated the coup d'etat in Indonesia. Like in the Middle East, there was just like this thing between the Israelis and the Palestinians. When did Israel become a country? Was it? Yeah, I think it was like 1945. It was just like directly after the Second World War that Israel became a country. And look, it was, I don't think it was the Jews per se. It was the fact that they were displaced. They were displacing Palestinians. Hence those of you familiar with Palestinian cause and way of life and so on, many of the Palestinians in the surrounding Arab countries that took in Palestinian refugees, especially Jordan, they would still have the key, the house key of their homes when they left, because they believed this Israeli war would be a temporary thing and they would be able to return home. You see, like no one think that they were going to be this permanent displacement. I don't believe in this so-called settler colonialism. Settler colonialism is a thing, but remember, colonialism per definition is like, if we just look at that word, means the extraction of resources. Like, nothing was extracted from Israel and sent, abroad, because they didn't have anything. Like, they didn't have a lot of agriculture. They didn't have a lot of they didn't have any minerals that I know of. Like, these days there are gas apparently, but like not significant amount of gas. Like, probably South Africa isn't known for its gas, but probably we have more gas than Israel. Like, and we don't have a lot of gas. Like, my point is that a bunch of people were displaced, and this like creates like an upheaval at the very same time, where you also have the Sino-Soviet split, and then the Soviet Union and the US is kind of like at each other's throats. They can't go to war. Like, I know the US kind of invaded Russia just after the Russian Revolution to kind of help the Tsarist government, but that was a conventional war. Like, here we're talking about both nations have nuclear weapons. So if you attack the opponent, you're done. Like, even if there is no winner in a nuclear showdown. I watched Joe Rogan, and yeah, you get interesting people on the Joe Rogan show. Like, I like the Joe Rogan show. I think Joe Rogan is brilliant in the sense that he's very open-minded and very curious, but sometimes he brings too many strange guests into his show. However, like, I find a lot of people fascinating. I bought a couple of books from some of his guests, mostly Peter Zion, but then also, I forgot her name, but it's a brilliant lady. She wrote a book on nuclear war. It's divided into 3 chapters, and basically, like, bottom line is it's the end of the world within 1 hour. And so the Soviet Union and America couldn't go to war with each other like in a conventional way, because that would involve nuclear weapons, which would mean the end of the world. What they could do is use like these proxy countries. And one of them was, unfortunately, these Arab countries with Israel. Like, and the US took Israel's side, and the Soviet Union took the Arab side, although like the Arab alliances would shift. Like, at one stage, like Egypt did become eventually a US ally, and Iraq got some US help but later they received some US help too. So it was like some shifting, but like in the 60s and 70s, it was like primarily like a proxy Cold War. There was going to be a war in any case, but like it's kind of the Americans and the Soviets made it worse. From student to revolutionary. Carlos's journey towards radicalism began during his time in Moscow. In the mid-1960s, after leaving Venezuela, he enrolled in the prestigious Patrice Lumumba University in the Soviet Union. This move was a significant one, both ideologically and psychologically. Moscow, the epicenter of global communist ideology, provided fertile ground for a young, idealistic man searching for his purpose and validation. There, Carlos immersed himself in Marxist-Leninist thought, influenced by both his Venezuelan upbringing and the prevailing political atmosphere of the time. The Soviet Union, with its vision of global revolution, resonated with Carlos's need for belonging to a cause larger than himself. Well, yes, like what you can, if you can say one positive thing about Marxism, Leninism, is it is a greater cause which kind of involves everyone. It is not it's not exclusive. Fascism is its opposite. Like, look, a lot of evil can happen in a Marxist state. Let's make no mistake. Stalin killed millions of his own people. And then we're not even talking about the, what do you call it, the Ukrainian Holodomor, the genocide of the Ukrainian people by Lenin. But its opposite is fascism, where like fascism light is Mussolini, but then proper fascism is like Hitler. Okay. And yeah, you see, well, that I guess with fascism, you also fall into a family. But yeah, if you're a student at the university, that's a sense of belonging, like this Patrice Lumumba University. And it's in a country that, as this Marxist-Leninist thought. So you're in a place of belonging within a greater place of belonging. And the greater place, the ruling party of the greater place of belonging wants to make the entire globe belong to itself. So you can see the romance of this. Oh yeah, I just recalled, I think Patrice Lumumba University was specifically meant for foreigners in Russia. So like that, but I don't know. Please like comment to me if I'm right or wrong. But this would make it even more interesting in the sense that like you will have Vietnamese, Indonesian, Algerian, Iranian, Iraqi, Congolese, like some South African, some Eastern European, like communists, like going to this university. So it's a global university, and everyone has like kind of the same belief. So it's kind of like you feel that your entire world, or the entire world, is like on one campus, which is kind of cool if you think about it. It's like although like the thought pattern would be the same, although there will be probably like differences. Small, yeah, that's actually like a big thing for communists. Is there are, well, look, communism has kind of died out. Like there is no communist country today, except North Korea and Cuba is changing quickly. Like China isn't communist at all. China like as its own system, the Chinese system, like. There isn't a better word for it. The Chinese system is the Chinese system. Like, but back in the day, like the 60s and the 70s, there was like a lot of different versions of communism, and sometimes there was like a fair amount of infighting, like let's say the Sino-Soviet split, but okay, it didn't really come to blows. Here and there was like some conflict, like for example the ELN and the FARC guerrillas in Colombia were not really friends at all, but in general, like you're on the same side. On the opposite side, you have fascists, and best case scenario, like neoliberal, like Chicago boys. So like the differences are quite stark, and then at a place like this Patrice Lumumba University, you can kind of like find your new family, and a family that's not going to judge you. You're going like Carlos the Jackal's parents did. Like you're going to find a family that will be accepting. Moscow also served as a key meeting point for many radical activists from around the world, particularly those aligned with anti-imperial movements. It was during this period that Carlos met several influential figures that would play a major role in shaping his future trajectory. Among them was Vadi Haddad, the leader of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP, an organization whose tactics of armed struggle against Israeli occupation would resonate deeply with Carlos. The ideological appeal of Palestinian revolution. Carlos's exposure to the Palestinian cause marked a crucial turning point in his radicalization. The Palestinian struggle against Israel was highly publicized and deeply symbolic battle for many left-wing radicals during the 1960s and 70s. The Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, and its affiliate factions, including the PFLP, were engaged in an armed campaign that drew widespread attention, both in the Middle East and the West. Carlos, with his radical ideals and desire for a larger cause to champion, saw the Palestinian struggle as the perfect outlet for his revolutionary fervor. Yeah, so we covered this. The Palestinians got a pretty rotten deal. I am not anti-Israel. I'm really not. Or I try to not be. But or anti-Jewish. But the Palestinians got after these. How many wars did they have? I don't even know. But many. There was 4 or 6 wars between the Arabs and the Israelis. The Palestinians, the Arabs got a bad deal, but except maybe the Egyptians. The Egyptians' deal wasn't so bad. That's why they became a US ally. I don't think they will be an ally for much longer in the future. That's a different video, and that will be future speculation, which I'm not very good at. But the Palestinians got a rotten deal. So then there will be solidarity. You will definitely find solidarity with many people, if you're a victim. It's human nature. The ideology of the PFLP, led by George Abash, emphasized violent resistance as a legitimate tool for achieving political aims. The PFLP's blend of Marxist-Leninist rhetoric and the support for the Palestinians' right to self-determination provided Carlos with a framework that aligned well with his own political views. His decision to join the PFLP was motivated by both ideological conviction and personal ambition. As a young man eager to prove his worth and escape the shadow of his father's revolutionary legacy, Carlos found the PFLP's militant ideology to be both empowering and affirming. It was with the PFLP that Carlos would first gain prominence on the global stage, taking the moniker Carlos the Jackal, as his international reputation grew. The name itself was a reflection of his calculated, merciless approach to his violent actions, a fitting symbol for someone who viewed terrorism not only as a means of personal vengeance, but as a tool of revolutionary warfare. So, yeah, I don't think there's any way to affirm terrorism or to talk good about terrorism. Terrorism is awful. Terrorism, per definition, kills civilians. It kills women. It kills children. Che Guevara had an interesting thought, and he was terrorism is acceptable if it's against military targets. And that's what you saw in Cuba, I was in Cuba, it was very interesting. I went to the place where they blew up the train. It was it was a turning point in the revolution where they did a surprise attack on this train, and it was quasi-terrorist, and they did a surprise attack on the Moncada barracks, but you can almost say that's guerrilla warfare. So I would say guerrilla warfare is terrorism light, but because what is terrorism? It terrorizes you, but it's totally different. Guerrilla warfare is totally different than terrorism in the sense that you don't target civilians. Targeting civilians is also, for me, a very bad idea, because you're just going to truly inferiorate your enemy. Not only just inferiorate them, you're going to let's say your enemy is actually a true bunch of assholes, and the people that your enemy govern, or the supporters of your enemy, their subjects, they may actually not like their rulers or their government, but if you attack these civilians, they will support their government. Oh yeah, like the jackal as an animal. It's an interesting animal. Like in South Africa, it's like we remark on the jackal's intelligence, its elusiveness, and like its opportunism, and also its most importantly its solitary nature. Yeah, and its solitary nature. This was like kind of like Carlos the Jackal. He worked with them, but you know he didn't like. So George Abash is the leader of the PFLP. Like Carlos the Jackal wasn't like Mr. Habash's like or leader Habash's employee by no means. Carlos's growing influence in international terrorism. In the early 1970s, Carlos began to make his name through high-profile operations carried out in the service of the Palestinian cause. His most notable action came in 1975 when he led a daring assault on OPEC, the Organization for Petroleum Exporting Countries, summit in Vienna. Yeah, 1975. It's 5 years before I was born. Carlos and his team of armed operatives took 60 hostages, including oil ministers from multiple countries. Like, sorry, I'm laughing, but it's just, what's the profile of an oil minister? It's like, think about it for one moment. Like, whatever your political affiliations are or your national affiliations are, an oil minister to me seems like this slick, oily, capitalistic, perhaps corrupt individual. It can be a very smart person, all that. It can be a very smart person who's got good intentions for his country, who wants to save every penny, like for, his country, to lift his country out of poverty and develop his country. It can be a person like that, or it's just like some dodgy person. They demanded the release of Palestinian prisoners held in Israel and threatened to kill the hostages if their demands were not met. The OPEC raid was a spectacular act of terrorism that garnered worldwide media attention and solidified Carlos's position as a key figure in international terrorism. Yeah, so like, I think this to get prisoners released is a very smart move or a demand, because like now suddenly like it's got like a dual effect. Point one, you get more troops into the field. Point two, it proves to the families of these prisoners that you care about them. So not only do you get more troops in the field, like because the probability of a Palestinian prisoner being released and then go and retire in the Maldives is pretty low. Like he'll probably take up arms again. Not there's something wrong with it. Like I don't mind. Like, well, I don't have a horse in this race. Like, I think the most significant thing is that you prove to the population, like it starts with the families of the prisoners. Because like a prisoner may have an extended family of 30 people. Like you show these people, like, look, we care about this person who put himself into danger. And then that will endear them to you. And also it will like increase the probability of your general recruitment being more successful, because potential recruits would think of you as like, okay, this organization cares. If I don't get killed, if I get captured, then they may try to get me out. Not a bad move. What set Carlos apart from other militants at the time was his tactical brilliance and his understanding of the power of the media. The OPEC attack was not just about political leverage. It was an orchestrated display of power meant to capture the world's attention. The media played a pivotal role in amplifying Carlos's message, and he was quick to recognize the potential of terrorism as a political tool that would shape political opinion and influence the international diplomacy. Carlos's involvement in international terrorism during this period was also marked by his growing association with other radical organizations. His relationship with Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi was one of the most significant, with Gaddafi providing financial support and military training to Carlos's operations. The connection to a state sponsor of terrorism gave Carlos access to a network of resources that allowed him to carry out increasingly sophisticated attacks. In return, Carlos supported Gaddafi's broader ideological agenda, which included opposition to Western imperialism and support for Palestinian independence. Gaddafi, yeah, what a dick. I know a lot of you will like him because he's seen as a liberator. Gaddafi, did a lot for his people. He did a lot for the average Libyan in the beginning of his rule. He built infrastructure like that famous, what do they call it again? Was it the water highway? These massive pipes. It's like the size of the roof of my studio. My studio's got a huge roof. These pipes underwater, under the sand, taking water from the coastal mountains or hills into the interior. That was brilliant. And he did all of this using oil money. And he was relatively dedicated to the cause, helping other people. One of the very first people that Nelson Mandela visited after his release was Muammar Gaddafi to thank him, for assisting the African National Congress in the liberation of South Africa. And Gaddafi helped many people. I believe he helped the Black Panthers. He helped Northern, the IRA, the Irish Republican Army. So he did do these things, but then there's some other problematic areas. He ordered the murder of this was back in the 80s. He ordered as he became more corrupt. Remember, corruption. And I can say this because I'm South African, and South Africa's been corrupt for a very long time. Corruption starts with a single person or a small group of people, and if it's not rooted out, then it starts spreading like athlete's feet. And essentially, Gaddafi was very corrupt. He had so many houses. He lived in such opulence. If you don't believe me, go check it out. Go and look at his mansions. Go and look at the clothes he wore, the food he ate, all the places he visited. He had a harem, okay? He did things to women, to many women, I would rather not talk about. So it's a very dualistic person. Very interesting person. And he was betrayed by the West. After 9/11, he said he will get rid of all of Libya's weapons of mass destruction, which wasn't a lot. It was just some chemical weapons or something. It wasn't significant, which he did. And then he became a friend of the West, and he sold them good oil. He went to visit Silvio Berlusconi. He went to visit, what was that French minister? Was it Jacques Chirac, I think? Was it Jacques Chirac or... Yeah, it wasn't Macron. I think it was Chirac. He went to visit him, and it looked Libya was totally normalized in the eyes of Europe. And under George Bush, in the US as well. And everything seemed to go hunky-dory until the Arab Spring. And then, I think the Arab Spring was justified. Like, it's not a color revolution. Like, if you think it was a color revolution, you simply don't know what you're talking about. You shouldn't talk down upon people, never. But, like, if you think the Arab Spring was orchestrated by the KGB or China or the CIA, it's not correct. Like, these things, these like Arab, what do they call a republic in Arabic? A Jumeirah. These Jumeirahs were very, very corrupt, and inefficient, like Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Iraq, Lebanon, Yemen, and to a lesser extent Bahrain, Sudan. Like, so when that guy immolated himself in Tunisia, like, it spread like wildfire. Like, it was the same when, like, in the Vietnam War, that monk immolated himself in Saigon. That monk in Saigon immolated himself. For those of you who don't know what immolation is, it's like when you, like, set yourself on fire using petrol or something. And that was like a catalyst. It wasn't like, it didn't start the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War was like already going for 20 years, but it really mobilized people where they realized, like, if this monk can set himself on fire because of his strong belief in getting rid of this corrupt, and that's, yeah, by the way, here is another, like, similarity. The South Korean government was very corrupt. I know, not South Korea, the South Vietnamese government was very corrupt. I know some of them fought very bravely. I watched, like, Ken Burns's, you should watch it, Ken Burns's, like, series on the Vietnam War. And it was a very cool series. They looked at both the viewpoints of the Viet Cong, the Viet Minh, and the South Korean, I'm saying Korean again, the South Vietnamese army. And the South Vietnamese army fought well, but the government was very corrupt and inept, and some of them took advantage of women. And the same happened in North Africa and the Middle East. So when that guy in Tunisia immolated himself, boom. This is like a bad pun, but literally, like, you know, a match into the gunpowder, you know, like, and that's what happened. And obviously it caught Gaddafi because all of these people around, he and all of the people around him lived in opulence. And what the West did, though, was they intervened. They shouldn't have intervened. That was a bad idea. Like, rather, like, it was brutal how these uprisings were put down. Like, Libya was probably the worst. Gaddafi's a very cruel man. But Egypt was terrible as well. Like, so I remember that scenic photo where that truck, that Egyptian police truck, just drove into the protesters. It was really awful to watch. But I mean, yeah, it doesn't come from a vacuum. Like, and there's like no reason for the CIA to have, like, done this, because it just, like, you can say to get the oil, but remember, that's colonialism. And to colonize a country is not easy. Like, you have to constantly put down uprisings and, like, people agitating for rights. So just remember, like, what something appears to be is not always what it is. But yeah, I'll make a video about Libya, because Gaddafi is, like, he's revered in South Africa, like because he was this anti-Western guy. He's revered for that reason. So it's not like, and I guess some places in Ireland, for example, as well, because Gaddafi helped the Irish. So it's very complicated. But this is like getting back to Carlos, the Jackal. This is like very interesting as well. Gaddafi is a very important man in this time, in the 1970s, and he's very powerful, and he's very rich, and he's very revered in both Africa and the Middle East. And someone like Carlos just comes and have a meeting with him. And okay, he was a generous man when it came to supporting terrorist organizations, but still, like, Carlos the Jackal's kind of a one-man show, and he gets like Gaddafi to help him. That's remarkable. Psychological drivers, ideology and power. Carlos's radicalization was not solely a result of ideological conviction. While he was undoubtedly influenced by the revolutionary movements of the time, his psychological needs played an equally important role in shaping his motives. As discussed in the previous chapter, Carlos was driven by a deep need for recognition and power, which he sought to fulfill through his violent actions. His involvement in terrorism was as much about his personal validation as it was about political struggle. You see, like, this is like very true very often, like with Hitler as well. Like, I'm just like always fascinated by the psychology of leaders. Like, Hitler came from a terrible home, hence Hitler, like rejection, from the art academy leads to radicalization. No, that sounds stupid. Like, in his case, it led to radicalization because now there's no other outlet. Like, if there was, let's say, for some reason, I don't know what Carlos studied at Patrice Lumumba University, but let's say he just got 99%, for example, for his subjects, and the Russians come to him and he's like, wow, you're an academic prodigy, like, please do your PhD. We need you to be a professor. Maybe this video would not exist because he would have been unremarkable, or, well, not known as a professor because there's millions of professors, but it's like a parallel universe, like a split in time would have been a split in time. Like, essentially, he would have done and become something else. So you are driven, like, this is like about Carlos the Jackal. And when we talk about this, like, almost any book or video will be about like his terrorism. But remember, this stuff didn't fall out of the sky. His parents weren't terrorists. Like, we don't know everything about his parents, and it would be fascinating to know everything about his parents. As I said, if we had like a psychologist in the corner that was invisible in his house 24 hours a day for 15 years, we would know what causes someone to become like this, but we don't. Like, we have clues though, like, because we have social workers in almost every country on earth, like, doing regular rounds and looking into the circumstances of people, and hence the availability of studies and research into psychopathy and if you're like a psychopath or a sociopath. Sociopathy, is that the word? I don't know. Like, English is my first language. Like, like when you're a sociopath, okay? Like, I don't know if Carlos the Jackal had like was a loving man. Let's put it that way. It's not a kindergarten teacher. Okay. And this violence then becomes part of your identity, much like Pablo Escobar, it's usually men. Women don't really do this. Women are remarkable creatures. Like men often turn to violence. If there is, okay, well, look, a lot can be said in favor of men. For example, it's mostly men who commit suicide. It's mostly men who get incarcerated. It's usually men who get killed. Okay, by other men, but men usually get killed. So I don't want to say men are victims. I'm just saying that these are facts. And turning to violence for someone like Carlos isn't unheard of. Moreover, Carlos's violent actions were driven by a sense of mission. In his mind, he was fighting an existential battle against the forces of imperialism and oppression. For Carlos, the revolution was both an ideological commitment and a personal crusade. His belief in the righteousness of his cause gave him the justification to commit acts of extreme violence, including the killing of innocents. The double-edged sword of ideology and opportunism. Carlos's radicalization was further complicated by the dual nature of his involvement in terrorism. While he espoused Marxist-Leninist ideology and claimed to be fighting for the liberalization of oppressed peoples, there were often contradictions in his actions that hinted at opportunism rather than pure revolutionary zeal. In some instances, Carlos appeared more interested in advancing his own personal goals than in achieving the political objectives of the group he claimed to represent. For example, Carlos's involvement in the OPEC raid and his subsequent operations were not solely aimed at furthering the Palestinian or left-wing causes. They were also asserting his need for validation. So, validation and power, and expanding his influences. His ability to manipulate and align himself with, I need to staple my scripts. It would make me less confused. I looked like a grandfather just now. Please forgive me. His ability to manipulate and align himself with various political and criminal organizations demonstrated that, at least at times, Carlos viewed his ideological affiliations as a means to an end. This opportunistic streak was evident in his unwillingness to work with a variety of state actors, his willingness, from Gaddafi's Libya to Soviet Union, even when their interests did not always align with his own. Carlos's relationship with the PFLP, while initially one of ideological alignment, was also marked by tensions. As his fame grew, he became more of a freelance operative, taking on missions that suited his own interests rather than following the directives of any one organization. His willingness to act independently, even when it conflicted with his own ideological roots, suggested that Carlos's motivations were always a complex blend of revolutionary fervor and personal ambition. So you see, people are complicated, very complicated. This script is almost an oversimplification of the person. When was it? Was it Al Jazeera or BBC? This British journalist called Tim Sebastian had a program. It was back in 2000. He had a program called The Person Behind the Persona, which is very interesting because you are perceived in a certain way by people around you, and then you are your own man or your own woman. So to just talk about Carlos's own motives and let's say his ideology, and then let's say his upbringing is still maybe an oversimplification. We don't know exactly what happened. We don't know, like, for example, at the university, with the assumption that he was only 3 years at Patrice Lumumba. 3 years is a long time. A lot can happen in 3 years. He could have met so many people, like it was mentioned. Was it Vali? I just remember the first name, Vali, in like the previous episode. Like that was just the guy's first name. I don't know. I forgot the second name. But that guy, we don't know, like if they played, pool together. Did they smoke? Well, I assume marijuana was illegal in the Soviet Union. Like if they played chess together, if they had a book club, we don't know. Like. We don't know what kind of perhaps that would be available. What was his university score? At least not in the script, so I can't speculate. But like, there's so many things. Maybe he had like, a girlfriend, or maybe he didn't have a girlfriend, and maybe that like, maybe his peers all had these beautiful Russian women. I treasure East Europeans. East Europeans are very friendly, like especially the women. They're very traditional. Like it's something like South Africa used to be like 300 years ago. Like I'm not saying this in a bad way at all. I'm just saying that sometimes tradition is very nice. It's got a nice touch. I'm not saying tradition is always good. Not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying he's got a nice touch. And maybe like his friends had like beautiful girlfriends and he had nobody. Maybe that affected him. We don't know. And what I do think though is that this daddy complex and the possible mommy complex, because this, like, unfortunately the script doesn't delve into the story of the mother, but what I know from Robert Mugabe is there's a lot of information available about Robert Mugabe's mother. She was very devout and she was very strict. So like that shapes you. And then obviously, like if your dad has like some ideology, I know it's nasty, actually, what this can do to you. Like, I know a lot of people, because I come from apartheid South Africa. I was born in 1980, a full 11 years before apartheid was abolished, and then a full 14 years before we became a democracy. And you can speak to some South Africans to this day who will claim we are still colonized. I won't argue with them, but like, it's a complex argument. But I know people who were raised by very racist parents, and that racism it polluted them as well. And they are less racist than their parents, luckily, but the remnants are still there. The scars are still there. Like, if you were like, I'm not playing a victim card. Well, I'm trying not to play a victim card here. But if your mind was polluted by apartheid, it takes a very long time to deprogram yourself. And Carlos was obviously programmed. So I'm not saying Marxism is bad per se. If we look at his dad abided by the law. If you're a law-abiding Marxist, I don't have a problem with that. Like, for example, what was it? Salvador Allende. Salvador means savior in Spanish. Salvador Allende was the first democratically elected president, a Marxist president in the world. So you see, here is like a force of good in Marxism. So don't come to me and tell me Marxism is bad. That is like nonsense. And don't tell me like neoliberalism is inherently bad or ontologically bad. I learned that word like a week ago, ontologically. It's so cool. Like, it ontologically means, I'm still not sure about the meaning, but it means like the study of the thing in its own existence. Like, you know, you can be a neoliberal person or a Marxist and you can still do good in the world. Like you can spread love, you can create things that's useful for other people, and you can dedicate your life by giving or, investing or like whatever. The ideologies aren't the problem. The ideologues are the problem. Religion isn't the problem. It's irreligious extremism that's the problem. And here we have like this very complex person. Carlos the Jackal's radicalization was shaped by both the political turbulence of the 1960s and 70s and his own psychological needs. His exposure to Marxist-Leninist thought, particularly through his interactions with Palestinian militant groups, provided him with the ideological framework that justified his violent actions. However, his personal psychological struggles, the need for power, recognition and validation were just as important in shaping his motivations. Carlos's embrace of terrorism was meant to fulfill both his ideological goals and personal desires, creating a complex and dangerous figure whose actions would leave an indelible mark on the world. So, yes, we are shaped from a very early age to fit into a certain mold. We are shaped like, the younger you are, the more impressionable you are. You probably all know this as a fact. And then, like, we are shaped by people around us our entire lives. Like, if you're a woman, for example, and your first boyfriend or husband beat you, you'll beat you seriously or beat you at all, like that will influence your worldview. Like, if you're a man and your wife cheated on you for 10 years without you knowing, and then she like takes all your money or something, that will shape the view of the world. If you almost die in an electric shock, if you're an electrician and you make a small mistake and you almost die by electricity, that will shape your view. If you were in a shark attack, that will shape your view. Like if you see a cow being killed slowly, you may become a vegan, you see. So there are so many things shaping us. So I am less interested in convicting Carlos the Jackal. It's been done already in courts. It's been done already in so many books. And well, right now, so he named himself Carlos the Jackal. In the TV series, The Jackal, the guy also names himself the Jackal. There is a sense of narcissism. But I'm more interested in understanding the person. Point one, I just find it interesting. I'm a curious person. But also, if we understand these things, we can go forth and we can try to fix some things. Like we can try to fix young men and young women who struggle to fit in, who struggle to identify, or like find their meaning and their purpose in life, and assist them into having outlets, like legitimate outlets for their rage, for their rage or their urges or whatever. We should help each other in society, and that's what I am interested in. I want to see like why did he do this? Why did it become this way? Instead of just judging him, because judging is so easy. Like you're probably judging me right now. I don't know. Like, and it's your right. It's your right to judge. Make no mistake. And Carlos the Jackal was judged. Like, actually, well, with so many people, it's specifically legally. I think he's, as of the making of this video, he's still in jail. But let's try to understand it first. Let's try to find the motive first. And once the motive is established, we can proceed from there. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you very much and have a nice day. Bye-bye.